So here we are. We're on the path of delight, the summertime of spirituality, the fruiting of the seeds that we've planted in our lives. And this passage today says that if we've planted spirit, we're going to grow spirit. So how does one plant spirit? It is, of course, an imperfect metaphor, as all our linguistic attempts categorizing the ineffable inevitably are. Say that 5 times fast. But still, the planting metaphor holds some clues for how we might experience a mature fruiting of spirit in our lives. Like the gardener of flowers or vegetables, the gardener of the spirit needs a paradoxical balance of intentional activity and complete surrender. So let's look at some of the intentionality required first. So a gardener first has to match plants with the amount of light needed. Hostas go in the shade, sunflowers go in the sun. Likewise, in the planting of our own souls, some of us require more sun and some of us require more shade. Maybe this means gaining an understanding of your own introverted or extroverted nature. Where are you most at ease? Where do you feel most at home? It might also mean gravitating towards the type of intelligence that resonates with you. Are you a musical rhythmic learner, or a visual spatial learner, or a verbal linguistic learner, or a bodily kinesthetic learner? Whatever type of intelligence is natural to you, plant yourself where that intelligence is comfortable. So sure, we can bloom where we're planted, as the poster says, but why not plant ourselves in a way that fits our true nature, rather than struggling to bloom where it feels too sunny or too shady for the type of soul that we brought into this world? As spirit gardeners, we also need to understand the nature of our own soil. Now, in gardening, the soil often requires amending. You might need more organic material, less clay, a different balance of acidity, depending on what kind of plant you're putting there. We too often, I would say all of us at some point, need amending. Trauma may have created places in us too compacted to receive and nurture seeds. Now, a gardener will aerate the soil, allowing water and nutrients to move more easily through it and to the plant roots. And the same is true for those constricted places in us. Understanding our own mental wellness is a kind of soil amendment. It's not a fault or a problem. It's simply what we need to do to make room for something good to grow. The timing, we also have different chemical makeups. The pH balance has to be right? It has to be, this is true for plants, true for us. For some of us, that literally means changing the chemicals in our body, maybe eliminating certain chemicals, maybe adding certain chemicals, getting the balance right so that we can receive the seeds. And the timing of planting also matters. I wonder how many of us have planted seeds in the harsh inner season of winter in our lives and then wondered why they didn't bear fruit. Maybe that was a time we just needed to be in the dark, waiting time, resting in a time of unknowing and fallowness. Then, when the spring thaws arrive in our hearts, we're ready to receive the seeds for the next planting season. So where to plant, how to amend the soil, when to plant, and then there is the matter of what to plant. Early in my life, and in fact, for the first 40 years of my life, I planted a lot of scripture and Jesus. And it bore fruit, good fruit, excellent fruit, I would say. And then I entered a fallow period. And afterwards, I tried to plant those same things, that had borne fruit before. And I found the ground of my being was like a field that was used for the same crop over and over and over again. And eventually the yield diminishes when you do that with crops. Crops need to be rotated. Different crops require different nutrients from the soil. So changing crops through rotation keeps us from stripping all of one type of nutrient from the soil and allows the soil to remain healthy over time. Sometimes you need a cover crop in the interim between plantings. And sometimes in our spiritual lives, we find that what bore fruit for us years ago, or even weeks ago, no longer does. The soil of our soul is ready for a new crop, a new kind of seed to be planted. I moved from Jesus to Hafiz for several years, and then I needed to rotate crops again. Still like Jesus, still like Hafiz. Needed a new crop. This is not a sign of a lack of faithfulness or even that there was something wrong with the previous crop. Sometimes the fields of our spirit are just ready to grow something different. So let's say we've invested some time into coming to understand the nature of our inner soil. How much sun versus shade, what kind of amendment is needed, when is the ideal time to plant, what type of seeds are going to be most productive, etc. Then what? Then, like the gardener, we wait. We cannot make the seed sprout. We cannot make it grow. We cannot make it grow to a certain height or taste or color. We cannot prevent nature's storms. We can weed, we can water, but to a large extent at this stage, we surrender. We have to wait for the seed to germinate. There's some magic involved that's beyond our control. Some trees take years before they produce any kind of fruit or nut. We aren't all on the same timeline. It's also true that some of us are more prickly than others. Not referring to myself, certainly. Just because a blackberry bush is covered in brambles doesn't mean that those blackberries aren't juicy, sweet, and wonderful. So even with the thorns and thickets, whether you're a shade-loving soul or a sun-loving soul, whether you need lots of water or thrive in the desert, there are certain elements that we can know that a spiritual planting will yield. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. There is no law against these things. Let's try those together. Repeat after me. Love, joy, peace. Oh, look at you. You don't even have to repeat after me. Patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. I'm going to invite you now into one more little exercise. We've done this before. It's known in spiritual circles as Lectio Divina. It just means sacred reading. And it's just a way of listening that gets us a little bit out of our heads and more down into our bodies and our hearts. So I invite you again to settle in, feel your body, be aware of where you are in time and space. Notice your breathing. And I'm going to read something, and as I read it, I invite you to listen with your heart. Don't try to understand all the words I say or think about them or think about what you think about them. Just see if a word or a phrase lands somewhere in you with a resonance. And if it does, just stay there. You don't even have to listen to whatever else I say after that. Just stay with what lands. Take a breath. What happens when we live in God's way? God brings gifts into our lives much the same way that fruit appears in an orchard. Things like affection for others, exuberance about life, serenity. We develop a willingness to stick with things, a sense of compassion in the heart, and a conviction that a basic holiness permeates things and people. We find ourselves involved in loyal commitments, not needing to force our way in life, able to marshal and direct our energies wisely. Legalism is helpless in bringing this about. It only gets in the way. Since this is the kind of life we have chosen, the life of the Spirit, let's make sure that we don't just hold it as an idea in our heads or a sentiment in our hearts, but work out its implication in every detail of our lives. Breathe. Welcome to the season of delight. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.